All right, I'm ready.
Are you sure?
No, but let's do it anyway.
So I want to help people understand what it is that I do and how I do it, and kind of give people the idea of what their experiences could be like when they're going through the program. And
Sure.
first thing I want to say is thank you for being willing to do this.
Yes, my pleasure. Happy to help.
Um, and my question would be, 2 years ago when you first reached out, what
Mhm.
were you going through that made you think that I was the person that could help you?
Sure. Well, I think you skipped a few steps. You're giving me too much credit already. I did not reach out thinking, gosh, I need help. Right. I complained a lot, and I happened to be in close proximity to you with some of my complaining. And you said, hey, I might know a thing or two about that. My point with this being is that I knew that I was uncomfortable. I knew that I was suffering in some way. I knew that things weren't like they could be with respect to my health, but I was just sort of powering through and looking for little tweaks here and there, just trying to kind of manage it on my own. And I think that's important because I think that's what a lot of people do. And um, I'm lucky enough that, again, I work with you and I'm in close proximity to you. And so you are the one that actually helped me realize this is something that is sort of a known entity and we can do something about it. So you had some of those initial conversations with me, and I said, okay, I'm not getting anywhere on my own. Let's dive in, right? And that's how the process started. Yeah, but I guess the heart of your question is what was I experiencing really, right? That had I been more aware, I would have thought to reach out to you. Um, and there were a number of things that I didn't necessarily sort of all connect together, right? I was having difficulty with sleep. Sleep was a problem. A lot of sleep irregularity, a lot of like kind of tension in the body when I was sleeping, restless leg syndrome, that kind of thing. A lot of waking up during the night. Basically, my circadian rhythms, I think, were just kind of all over the place. And then I was also noticing a lot of digestive discomfort. So the number one symptom that I experienced was I would go through these phases where I would sort of feel okay if I was eating very, very clean, but then other phases where I wasn't eating anything other than what I was normally eating, and for a period of like a couple weeks, I would experience this phenomenon where I would just take even a single bite of food, or sometimes even just drink some water, and immediately would feel like a bloating response in my abdomen, and I was getting kind of like a lot of like kind of gurgling and churning kind of stuff happening in my gut. Um, so just a lot of digestive discomfort, that uncomfortable bloating, kind of sometimes painful, but mostly just kind of annoying, right? And then accompanying that was this experience of, I would describe it as the reactions of my body and body composition to what I was eating as being really disconnected, right? So I could eat really healthy for long periods of time, and my body wouldn't really seem to change or respond positively to that. It was very easy for me to gain weight, to hold weight. Conversely, difficult time losing weight. Um, Again, even with caloric restriction, even with very clean eating, sometimes I would go, several weeks at a time, trying to drop a few pounds, and I would be in one of these phases where everything I ate just seemed to make me bloated, and it's my experience was sort of like, well, I guess I give up. This doesn't seem to be working. Right? So, what else was I experiencing? Fatigue, a lot of daytime fatigue, um, lightheadedness during workouts. So there was a whole, again, kind of constellation of things happening that I didn't necessarily all kind of connect to one another initially. Yeah.
So we went through like the first year, and there was a long process of detox using
Mm-hmm.
supplements. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember what that was like with all the supplements?
I do. for me, actually, that part wasn't a big deal. At least the supplementing part wasn't a big deal. I think nowadays anybody who's used to any sort of regular supplementation, I don't think that part was particularly difficult. Now, the experience on the supplements is a different story, right? That was, I don't know, difficult, but not, much preferable to what I'd been going through. Let me put it that way, right? Like I was excited to know that there was change happening, but yeah, I mean, it exacerbated some gut discomfort, bowel issues kind of all over the map as we were doing the gut detox. That was the first thing we did, was the gut detox, but it all seemed to be pointing somewhere positive. So it's one of those things you just kind of like lean into it and embrace. And in the grand scheme of things, I think the worst of it was, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that, right? Probably not even that, because I would say I went through probably like a 3-week period of really acute response to the detox protocol.
Like when
It
you
was,
said, why do I have all this bruising on my right side?
yeah, that was the liver detox. Yes, that was the phase. I think that was the second phase that we did. Yeah, right. It's things that, in different circumstances might have been concerning about, oh my God, like what's going on? But, working with you, knowing I was going through this process, I went, oh, hey, you ever see anything like this? And, you pointed out that, this bruising, so to speak, happened to be showing up kind of right over my liver, which coincidentally we'd started doing a detox around, like I want to say like 48 hours before. Like it happened pretty quick. Yeah. And I, again, part of the process being handing over, even though I, am educated and work in this realm, right, to some extent, handing over the process to somebody outside of yourself who can monitor and know what's going on and tell you what to do and all of that, was super helpful. So my point being, I wasn't even thinking, gosh, I should do a liver detox. I mean, I don't really take medicine. I don't drink really. I mean, I have maybe a single drink every week or two. So I'm not a big drinker. I don't take Tylenol. I don't take, so I don't stress my liver. So I'm not thinking to myself, I should really take a look at my liver. I just continued to describe to you what I was experiencing. And your, expertise led you to recognize, oh, there's probably something going on with your liver. And so we do the detox, and sure enough, there's this huge liver flush that takes place. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a point where we restricted, like you like to smoke a cigar every once in a while and you drink coffee. So there was
Yes.
where we restricted that. Um, how
Mm-hmm.
was that part of it?
Again, not fun, but also, let's not make it more than it is. Yeah, I didn't have to give up breathing or sleeping, so it was fine. The food part's harder for me. Coffee, I love coffee. It's as much kind of a comfort and a habit as it is anything. And in fact, it probably took 2 days of not drinking coffee. Did I give it up completely for a while? I did. That's right.
Big
How long did I give it up for?
30 days.
That's right. At the beginning. And then later we're doing something else where I could have coffee, but only after like 9 a.m.,
Yeah.
10 a.m. Maybe you said 10 a.m. and maybe I did 9 a.m. I can't remember. It took a couple days of like getting used to it. And then I realized, oh, it's just a habit. And actually, one of the things I remember recognizing when I started drinking the coffee again, now that I think about it, was that I would take a sip of coffee and immediately feel tired, which is totally counterintuitive, right? People think they're drinking coffee just to alert themselves. Well, it depends on what's happening in your body. And I was dealing with some adrenal fatigue is probably too strong a word, stress, over stress, right? And so for me, taking in stimulants triggered this sort of cascade of hormonal things that led me to immediately feel like I needed to take a nap. And I only recognized that after I stopped drinking coffee for a couple days this was later on. So it was after I'd given it up for 30 days. Yeah. Yeah. So again, all things relative, right? Like I really wanted to feel better long term. I really wanted to feel like my health was back on track. And the symptoms I was dealing with were so much worse than, sitting there in the morning and not having a cup of coffee, that it didn't really bother me at all. Yeah. Giving up the cigars, again, same kind of thing. It's as much a habit for me, um, not like an addiction, just sort of like this is what I do to relax kind of a thing, right? That there was a period of, well, if I'm not doing that to relax, what am I doing? And you got to kind of work through that, but it was easily worth it for me. Yeah.
And then at the beginning of 23, we made
Mhm.
a shift, right? So
Yep.
throughout all of what we were doing with the detox, there were also some meal plans that were included. And for a period of time to help with the adrenal stress, I asked you to actually eat more frequently and
Hmm.
a little bit more calories.
Yep.
And then at the beginning of 23, you came to me with a totally different problem.
Hmm.
And you were like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and nothing's changing. In fact, I'm gaining weight. How do we fix
Yes,
it?
that's right.
So we switched gears a bit.
Hmm.
And can you describe what you experienced in that first 6 weeks in February when we started working together?
Yes. So that phase was really, so the first phase was more about sort of comfort and health in general, and just kind of feeling like my hormones and my body, everything was operating on, all of the cylinders. And that was really helpful. But uh, I was still carrying probably 25, 30 pounds more than uh, I prefer to. Right. Um, and then I had something coming up that I wanted to go to and fit in one of my suits that I wasn't fitting into. And I came to you at the last moment and said, help. Um, yes. And so that 6 week phase was also pretty revelatory. So, I mean, the caloric restriction was obviously a part of losing weight, and that part's pretty non-negotiable, right? I'm used to that. That wasn't necessarily difficult. Um, it was the food choices were interesting. I spent a lot of years eating in kind of a bodybuilder style, and eating in ways that I would have called clean eating. And that 6 week phase was so much even more sort of strict and confined. Um, Now I don't think of it that way. Now it's just the way I eat, because that period was such a revelation for me. That basically, I was eating meat, vegetables, and a little bit of fruit, and that was pretty much it. Right. No dairy, no grains of any sort. Um, and I immediately started losing weight. So it worked very well. Obviously, because we'd resolved the metabolic problems and the gut issues the year before, so I was able to respond. Again, it turns out I was doing things that I thought were healthy and consistent with losing weight that just weren't really working for my body. So um, that was a big piece of it, was just recognizing, oh, I'm not really a grain person. We've since kind of reintroduced, but I notice immediately, like I can kind of get away with it now because I have so much more gut resiliency since that work that we did. But there's other side, like I can tell it's not really for me. Like I still need to be cautious, and I feel best and do best when I'm just eating proteins, vegetables, and fruits. Um, I also notice that things get out of whack if I'm strict, but I'm not eating the things I'm supposed to eat, particularly the vegetable portion. Like if I'm just eating the proteins and fruits, right, but I'm not eating enough of the vegetables, I mean, there's an immediate difference. I can tell immediately that my system responds differently. My hunger gets out of whack. I don't know if it's my insulin is doing something to, I don't know what it is. But anyway, I digress. The other big piece of that 6 week phase that you recommended that was quite life changing for me, that I never would have done on my own, was change my intermittent fasting window.
Mhm.
Right. So I'd had experience with intermittent fasting previously, and it was pretty easy for me because I'm a guy, the kind of, I can get up, skip breakfast, go work out. Um, Working out hard like I do is an appetite suppressant, right? So if I get up, skip my breakfast, work out at 9:30, done by 10:40, home at like it's the next thing you know, by the time I've shot, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I haven't eaten, and that's okay. And then I just have to push it another hour or two and have my first meal at 2 or 3 or whatever. So that was always very easy for me. You suggested or insisted that I do the opposite, right? That I start eating immediately when I wake up, which took some adjusting, and be done eating. For a while that was pretty aggressive. I think like by 2 o'clock,
Yeah.
I was done eating. And the first thing I noticed, and I noticed it within I think 2 days, was that so I track my sleep with an Aura ring, and my overnight resting heart rate when I would sleep well, was well rested and all of that. If I was lucky, it would get down to like 58, 59 beats per minute. Average was typically around 60. Within the second day of switching my intermittent fasting window and being done eating by 2 o'clock, my overnight heart rate would drop down into the high 40s, like 47, 48, with an average of like 52, something like that. So to me, that was like a massive eye opener that my body was getting that much more rest, was that much more recovery, that much more deep sleep by switching my eating window. Yeah.
So there was a point, I think it was probably 3 weeks in, where there was a day where you didn't track your food. And
No, surely that didn't happen.
um, I think it was like midway through the next day, you said, just FYI, and this was over a weekend, so you
Hmm.
got to see me in person. Just FYI, I cheated and had, I think it was like bread or something.
Okay.
Um, and you said I felt like my hormones were getting super out of balance. Do you remember that conversation?
No, tell me more.
So you had been losing like pretty steadily, and then you hit like kind of a day where, or a week where you only lost like a pound and a half.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And then you had said that you felt like there was a shift and like you had more
Oh yes.
hunger.
Yep.
And so you cheated and had bread at like four
I
o'clock
do.
in the afternoon.
I do remember that. Yep.
And then afterwards we had a conversation about how that wasn't really you having that like hormonal hunger. It was your body switching from using only sugar for burning fuel to using more
Yes.
ketones
More
for
fat.
burning fuel.
Hmm. Yep.
And so actually burning the fat that was stored on your body.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
can you describe, do you remember at all what you felt like when that was happening? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who have that.
Yeah, I do remember that now. Well, it's what you said. I just, I was hungry during a lot of that 6 weeks. I mean, I lost, I think, 27 pounds in that 6 week period, something like that, which is a lot. Um, so I was hungry for a lot of it. And this, it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a difference between sort of just an empty stomach hunger and sort of like a deeper hunger that sort of encompasses the whole body, right? And for much of that time, it was just sort of a stomach hunger, right? It's like the rumbling belly and, a sense of I'm not full, but that was it. It was just kind of um, limited to the stomach, the experience of the stomach per se. The rest of my body actually felt amazing, right? And that kind of hunger is very easy for me to work with. It's not a big deal. And then yes, later in that process, there was this switch to where I suddenly felt like I was depleted, right? Not just that I was hungry because my stomach was empty, but that like my whole body was hungry, my whole body was depleted. And that feels like it feels a little bit more like alarm bells, right? Like the body's going, wait, what's going on? Help me. What I've associated with hormonal fluctuations in the past, thinking, again, this is kind of classic old school bodybuilding, like that would happen. And you would go, oh, I need a refeed day. Right. So I did that without asking my coach, and I got scolded appropriately because that's not really what was going on, is your point. Right.
And then you've, like you said, you've like made this a lifestyle
Mhm.
change. And so you eat this way most of the time. I mean, there are days where you have a
Mhm.
cheat meal or like even a whole,
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Day. I don't care
Right.
what you eat on Thanksgiving Day. I don't care what you eat on Christmas.
Yeah.
I don't care what you eat on your birthday. Like that's not everyday life. That's a
Mhm.
special occasion.
Mhm.
Um, can you describe what that looks like now and how it's different and even the changes that we've made in the last couple of weeks?
Um, well, the last couple of weeks it's the first time that I've really done this process with caloric uh, surplus or even really true maintenance, which for me is a lot of calories, you know. Um, so that's been a very different experience. But what was the first part of the question?
What has the rest of the year looked like since you've finished the 6 weeks?
Oh, right, the regular. Yes, thank you. Um, it just looks like, honestly, like most of the 6 weeks did, just with a few more calories. But I'm sort of instinctively inclined now to just eat the way that I was eating on that 6 week program, which again at the time felt extreme, and now just feels like this is just how I eat. That's what my body, calling it a craving isn't really the right word, but that's what my body wants. That's what tastes good to me. That's what feels good to me. And I've just learned, right, that if I'm doing that, I don't have some of these spikes of hunger or energy flux later in the day. That if I start my day the way that I'm supposed to, the way that I've learned works best for me, right, that the whole day goes much better. So it looks very similar. I mean, it's the same pattern. I don't weigh and measure everything necessarily anymore. I have a good eye for it, after doing it for a long time. So I know I'm in the ballpark, but that part doesn't really matter so much now. But I just go and I select the same foods, a good quality protein source, plenty of vegetables, and then a little, piece of fruit, which is sort of serves it as my dessert, right? And it's just habitual, and it's what my body wants. It's what leaves me feeling full and satisfied, and that's what I do on a daily basis now by default. And I have much fewer cravings for anything outside of that. As long as I'm sticking with it and doing it, I don't have the need or the desire so much for other foods. And as somebody who's had kind of a rocky relationship with food, let's call it that, over 30 years now, um, it's also really nice to be able to go on those special occasions and really enjoy food in a different way, um, where there isn't any sort of craving or need attached to it. It's more fun, celebration, etc. um, and another strange phenomenon for me that I experience relatively often now is to be eating something that's really, really good and get to a point where I recognize I'm full and just stop eating. Like that's not something I've done much in my life. That's not something that's, bulking bodybuilders or football players or, food junkies like me, are used to. So that's an interesting experience too.
Is there any reason why you would think someone who was struggling with their health shouldn't do the program?
Um, Not off the top of my head. I would, certainly defer to your expertise. I'm sure that there are certain red flags that you see in people where you think, I don't think you're a great candidate for this. I don't really know what those are. But I don't think there's any reason not to do this, assuming there are no red flags from your perspective. For anybody who's interested in changing the way they look, changing the way that they feel, and again, there's the vanity part that's okay, right? Like we all want to sort of look our best. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all. I have as much of that as anyone, but I also, for me, it was just as important to work with some of these symptoms that I was experiencing and feel more resilient to sleep. We notice these things more. I'm 46 now, right? In your mid 40s and beyond, these things add up, right? And if we're not addressing them now, it might not seem like that big of a deal now, but then 10 years later, it's a much harder problem to solve sometimes, depending on the cascade of things that has sort of taken place over the course of a 10-year period. And I didn't want to experience that, right? So I think anybody who is sort of in that kind of a place, who recognizes, even for somebody like me who, other people look at and go, well, you're young-ish, right? You're still young, you're still in your 40s, you're healthy. Like, look at you, you're in shape, you work out hard, you do all of these workouts, I see you eating healthy, clean food, all of that. Yeah, but they don't really know what that experience is on the inside. And I could tell things were not working the way that they should be. Right. And I didn't want to let that snowball and then 10 years down the road be dealing with whatever it is that all kinds of things can pop up. So yeah, I think anybody that resonates with that as being in a place of even pretty darn good health, right? But also recognizing that there's sort of a whole realm of health potential that maybe they're not tapping into, I think would benefit tremendously. Yeah.
So one last thing I want to touch on is you talked about the caloric restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way that the base program is written, right? But we made from the very beginning adjustments for you because we knew you were going to keep working out. And also you carry more muscle mass than a lot of the clients that I see on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so that caloric restriction, like in the very beginning, we had you between like 1,600 to 1,800 calories.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you had some hunger, but it wasn't that level of like starvation.
Yeah, it was not a big deal. Yeah.
And then there was, I think it was at like week 4 in the very beginning, we switched you to like 2,200 to 2,400 calories.
Mm-hmm.
And you were still able to lose weight eating, even adding 600 to 800 more calories a day.
Yeah. In fact, my weight loss had slowed down on the lower calorie part of the program, and you made me bump up to 2,200 calories, right? Which again was a little bit counterintuitive, and I immediately started losing weight again. Yeah. So.
And then even now, like at 3,000 calories over the last couple of weeks, you went up a little bit the first couple of days, but then you kind of went back down to a good weight and have stayed there.
Yeah. So at my lightest, but by lightest, I mean the lightest I've been in about 10 years, easily 10 years. I dropped down to about 249. And then we switched gears. I bumped my calories way up, and I did have a little bit of a sort of a bounce up into like the mid 250s, but then it immediately came back down, and I'm still checking in daily, and I'm right around 252, 252 and a half. So, 3 pounds off of my low while taking in, 600 to 800 more calories a day consistently. And for people who aren't terribly familiar with these sorts of things, 3 pounds, that's explained by water and glycogen, right? Like that's not I gained 3 pounds of fat back. I started taking in some grain carbohydrate, started experimenting with some rice here and there, potatoes around Thanksgiving, all that kind of good stuff. And that's a lot more carbohydrate than I've been used to. And I could tell my muscles kind of soaked that up, right? And the body holds more water and more stored glucose, right, as glycogen. And that's that. I mean, in a guy my size, I can fluctuate 7 or 8 pounds easily of water and glycogen. So having a 3 pound fluctuation is essentially nothing, right? Yeah.
And so it's something that you're still pretty happy with.
Oh yeah, I'm thrilled. I mean, at this point, I'm full, and again, for a guy like me, that's a big deal, right? Like I'm full. I don't really think about food. I eat what I want, which isn't to say I eat anything. I eat what I want, which happens to be 98% of the time, the foods that work best for me. And my body weight hasn't really changed. I'm still sort of fitting into all of the clothes that, I'm wanting to fit into. In fact, I did lodge a complaint with you, um, that the brand new suit that I bought in April that I wanted to, sorry, that's right. I wasn't on old. I wasn't trying to fit into an old suit. I was scheduled to have a fitting for a new suit, and I wanted it to fit. So I got to, spend a lot of money on a brand new suit in April, after losing 27 pounds. Right. And that suit is now huge on me. Huge.
And the weight difference between April and now is only right now, as of today, 3 pounds.
Correct. Yes.
But it's totally different.
If it's totally different. Yeah. So there's continued to be changes, right, of some sort, where I think mostly what it is I've continued to lose intra-abdominal weight. So the fat that we store inside of the body, not under the skin, right? Not subcutaneous fat, but intra-abdominal fat. I think I've continued to slim up there, which, by the way, for those listening, that's like the deadliest kind of fat, right? Like if you're carrying fat in the abdominal wall, like surrounding your organs and in your guts and all of that, that is well known to be sort of one of the biggest red flags, biggest risk factors for disease, early death, et cetera. So losing intra-abdominal fat's a big deal. Yeah. So roughly the same weight. By the way, my strength through much of this continued to go up. It's not like I was losing muscle. And yeah, now even that suit that I lost 27 pounds to be able to fit into is now too big. And specifically around like the midsection. Like it's a nice single-breasted suit. It's supposed to button, tailored, custom made, all of that, right? Fits my body perfectly. And now it like kind of folds over me twice. So yeah. Which again, I'll have it tailored, not the end of the world. These are good problems. These are the kind of problems I want to have. Yeah. The other thing I'll add to this, you're asking about like who should be doing this, right? For people who have no idea who I am, I do hands-on work for people, and hypnosis work for people with a lot of pain. So I work a lot with body pain, chronic pain in particular. And I work with pain a lot through the level of the nervous system, right? So it's a lot of nervous system assessment and interaction. Functional neurology is the term, right? And I have seen people consistently who come in, and I'm able to do just a little bit with them, but I can only really get about 10% of the way into the process with them, because the biggest problem that they're experiencing isn't something that I can work with neurologically, because of how out of whack their system is from a gut health and immune system perspective, or again, their overtoxified liver, whatever it is, or organ and gut stuff, essentially. And so, for years I've run into a wall with those people. Now I've, referring them to you. But for people who aren't really thinking in terms of looking better, dealing with long-term health issues, et cetera, but they're just thinking, I just, have this achy shoulder or whatever it is, they're trying to get out of pain, be more active, et cetera. This is a huge part of that, right? That as someone who works with that on a daily basis, helping people resolve joint and muscle issues, it's much harder and sometimes impossible to do that if people have some of this underlying gut and organ system stuff going on. So that's another reason to potentially look at this.
Yeah, I think I did a post about 6 weeks ago that was something similar to, it's really hard to trust your gut when your gut isn't working for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Because if you've got bad feedback, how do you trust that?
Yeah.